You guys, I like the Spider-Man movie. Holy shit, I love Spider-Man No Way Home. Or, I think I love it. Jury's still out on if I want to just throw around the L word like that, but after over a year of leaks and rumors and speculation and hype, I prepped myself for disappointment and pretty good. Of course, I still got some issues with the movie. A lot of concerns I had ended up being true, so it's fair to expect a fanboy rewrite of it sometime in the future once all the honeymoon phase hype has calmed down. But in spite of those things, the movie still somehow ended up being super enjoyable, and this is overall a huge step in the right direction that this version of Spider-Man, in my opinion, needed to truly be Spider-Man. There are genuine stakes and consequences, and oh my god, there are consequences for his actions! That's kind of the bare minimum, and it shouldn't have taken like 5 years to get there, but oh my god, they did it! And especially after that ending, this is the first time since 2016 that I'm genuinely excited for something involving this version of the character. The way that this movie ended off just screams potential, and I'm over here just crying for more. That was typo. That was supposed to say screaming, but I'm just gonna keep it in. That final sequence, Peter sitting alone, looking out the window into the snow, his life having fallen completely to pieces, but still putting on the suit. Oh my god, that suit is perfect, by the way. I like the shininess, I like the blue, it looks so good! But still putting on the suit, going out and being Spider-Man regardless of what's happened to him is the most Peter Parker thing I have ever seen in my life. Like, that's some Spider-Man Lotus shit right there. It's already been confirmed that we're getting another trilogy with Tom as Peter in the MCU, and I cannot wait to see where they go from here. Now, since there's probably going to be a good while before we get any info about this next movie, I figured I'd throw my pitch out there for what the fourth movie in this series could be. And so that way, when we do get info, I can do this all over again because I gotta keep that Spider-Man content wheel turning. For this video, I want to take a look at some of my favorite things about No Way Home and see how much of that can be applied to these future movies. I don't expect them to go in this direction for the fourth movie. This is more so what I would do if Kevin Feige kicked down my door, put a bag over my head, and took me to a secluded location and then told me to plan out this next college trilogy. As for the director, I think Jon Watts proved himself with No Way Home and took all the criticisms to heart, but I do think it's time for someone new to take up this trilogy. And that person is High Top Films. I'm kidding. Or am I? I am. Also, we're dropping the home titles because that was never a good idea to begin with. What were they thinking? So here's my pitch for Spider-Man First Hunt. That's right, it's a Craven movie, baby! We open in the African safari in the blazing sun. A rhinoceros pounds its hooves into the dirt as it prepares to charge. A man stands in its path. As the rhino charges ahead, Craven the hunter places his fists around the horn and topples it to the ground. The beast heaves, its breathing slowing as veterinarians surround it to treat its fever. Sergei Kravinoff claps the dirt off his hands and he sighs. He's been doing this all his life, training to become the best, but there's no challenge for him anymore. No more thrill. That's when his wife Alexandra hands him an envelope. There's no return address and no name attached from a completely anonymous sender. He opens the envelope to see a handful of newspaper clippings. Articles talking about how animal-themed criminals have been popping up all over New York before he flips to the final page. We cut to New York as snow falls from the night sky. All is peaceful and quiet until... Holy fuck, the Rhino comes crashing through a building with Spider-Man holding on to dear life. Peter is dragged across blocks as Rhino rams into building after building to get him to lose his grip, and Peter pulls onto his horn to steer him into the local dump. No, not Staten Island. There we go. Peter and Rhino fight until Peter eventually takes him down by grabbing his horn and knocking him to the ground. Do you see the parallels here? Do you get it? Do I need to explain it to you? Do you get it? It's because he's like... We cut back to Craven as he looks to his wife and says, I think it's time for a change. I was gonna do a Russian accent. It's not gonna go well. I'm not gonna do that. So why Craven for this movie? Well, that answer's pretty simple. I really like Craven and it's my video, so shut up. Craven is one of those super iconic and interesting Spider-Man villains that is long overdue for a movie appearance. The same way that Mysterio was back before Far From Home came out. In fact, Jon Watts even said that if the multiverse stuff didn't pan out with No Way Home, then they would have made Craven the main villain, which would have been sick. As for casting, I have no fucking clue. I know Sony's apparently making that Craven movie with Kick-Ass, aka Mr. Dead Quicksilver, and I have no idea what's going on with that. So if that ends up fitting here, sure, go for him, I guess. Not gonna lie, I've always felt like Idris Elba would be a really good Craven, but I know he's already Heimdall, and he's also every white person's favorite fan cast for every role, so I don't know, I just think he'd be cool. But yeah, just whoever. Sure, fine. A little problematic, but fine. After that, we get our usual Marvel fanfare, you know, the thing that goes on for way too long and isn't as cool as the old Marvel logo. Oops, I did not mean to keep that in the script. We then cut to Peter as he enters his apartment. His landlord tells him that he's past due on rent and he smells like garbage, but Peter just ignores him. No Way Home left Peter off in the most interesting and unique way that I could possibly imagine. Peter Parker is completely alone. He literally has nobody. Not a single person in the whole universe even knows he ever existed. This is essentially uncharted territory for this character. He's always had at least an Aunt May, or when that old crone finally kicks the bucket, he has someone like Mary Jane, but now he has Nothing.
And I fucking love that.
It would be really easy to start this movie off and Peter's already got a new set of friends and we just have a new cast of supporting characters, but I think it'd be far more interesting to really dive into this element, especially given that it's the only time that this story can be told. So with Peter's loneliness comes isolation. His pain is making him cut people out of his life and either stay holed up in his crappy apartment or go out and wear the mask. Peter Parker's life is essentially gone, and he has no real intent on ever bringing it back. He works a shitty job as the IT guy for the Daily Bugle. He hates it there after everything they did, but it's the only place that would hire him. In between movies, he killed his GED exam, and he started going to Empire State University with a decent scholarship as long as he can keep his grades up. And we see that the people in his class have tried to reach out to him. I don't want to do Harry Osborn or Gwen just yet. I feel like those are too big of characters to just introduce in between movies like that. So the people in his class are Randy Robertson, Kenny Kong McFarlane, Carly Cooper, and Flash Thompson. I just think it'd be kind of funny if Flash got kicked out of MIT, and also I just want more Tony Revolori because he was kind of wasted in these movies. So they invite him to parties, to go hang out. You know, he's Tom Holland, so he's getting asked out on the daily, but he always declines. He tells himself that it's out of safety for others, that he doesn't want anyone to be put in danger, but in reality, he doesn't want himself to get hurt. After Ned and MJ, he doesn't want to feel that pain of losing someone all over again, and it's made him selfish. The source material of Peter's early college days are complicated. NerdSync has a fantastic video on this that I highly recommend, but basically that era of comics portrayed Peter as incredibly selfish, putting himself over everyone else in his life, not as a flaw that he would overcome with growth, but as a positive trait for the character. He essentially regressed back to how he was before Uncle Ben died. Peter doesn't care about Aunt May, he's aggressive with Betty Brant, he even goes and yells at a bunch of people that are protesting against police violence, which, Jesus Christ, that's not a great look, Peter. Basically, it's just kind of common knowledge among readers that this era wasn't exactly the best representation of the things that Peter Parker stood for. So I think we should adapt it into a movie. No Way Home managed to do the impossible. Somehow it took one of the most hated comics of all time, One More Day, and it made it good?
How the fuck?
And so now, with Peter at his lowest and most alone, this is going to be the time to tell this kind of story right. Peter Parker is not perfect. He's not the flanderized sweet golden boy that's never done anything wrong in his life ever. He can be flawed and make mistakes, and it's not caused by a symbiote or mind control or anything, but by pain and by trauma and by fear. And it can be his lesson throughout the movie to not be alone anymore, to not be selfish, and to let people back into his life, into Peter Parker's life. Peter ends up going to visit Aunt May's grave. Every day he goes and he talks to her, and if the Sony lawyers let us, maybe we'll show Ben's grave too next to it, maybe, I don't know, it's really pretty easy, just do that, and then I think most people would be satisfied. He goes and he talks about his day, his life, the people he meets, and the ways that he's living up to their legacy as Spider-Man and continuing what they stood for. And that's how we can frame some of these more complex ideas into the introduction through a little bit of narration. If we can't do that, we can also establish that maybe Peter's been filming himself at home to make up for the lack of social interaction he's been getting, you know, like a fucking loser. So anyway, as we're establishing these things throughout the first act, we get snippets and montages of Peter fighting various animal-themed villains. Beetle, kangaroo, tarantula, grizzly, human fly, hippo. Holy shit, there's a lot of animal villains. One villain that I want to introduce is the Vermin. Vermin is a character that kind of sucks. He's basically just a rat dude that's like a monster and he eats people, and there's really not that much to him. His biggest thing was that he was in Kraven's Last Hunt, and since then he's been kind of forever tied to Kraven, and writers keep on bringing him back no matter how much people kind of hate him. He sucks. But the reason I want to bring in Vermin is because I think he gives the opportunity to further explore an aspect of No Way Home that I really loved. And that was how Peter's main motivation throughout the movie was to help out all of the different villains. Not by punching them in the face, but by actually trying to make them better. This is the perfect use of the Spider-Man character and shows a true and deep understanding of what makes Peter Parker special, and I really like that it was something that Peter had to figure out. It would be really easy to just have Peter regress as a character and revert back to a traditional superhero formula for the rest of the movies, but I would really like to further explore that idea of helping the villains, and not only the sympathetic ones, but all villains. It doesn't take a sob story or a family to make someone worth saving, especially when they're a victim of someone else and not in control of their actions. I think a fundamental part of superheroes is the idea that all life is valuable, and I think Spider-Man should be representing that. That was improv. I improv'd that. Are you guys proud of me? That's pretty good. So Peter's chasing Vermin down the streets when he turns a corner into an alley and sees the monster knocked to the ground. And Kraven the Hunter stands above Vermin with a spear to his throat. Peter looks at this absolute beast of a man wearing a whole ass lion's face on his shoulders and, as expected, is a little put off. Peter's all like, "Hey, thanks for the help, but I had this handled, gabagool." Spider-Man's from New York, you know how it is. And Kraven's all like, "No you didn't," before he lifts his spear and tries to kill Vermin. Peter stops him just in time and is like, "Whoa, hey there buddy, he's just a regular guy, he didn't do anything wrong, it's not his fault. Hey, the New York Mets, I think they're gonna go all the way this year." Kraven gives I can't do this anymore. Kraven gives some shit about how he's a hunter and Vermin is the prey and it's a law of nature, and he expected a natural hunter like a spider to understand that. And so because of this little itty bitty tiny disagreement about the value of human life, Peter and Kraven fight. Now Kraven surprisingly holds his own against Peter, using raw strength and tactics and tools that Peter's not used to from anyone he's faced. But at the end of the day, Kraven is just a man, and Peter's able to take him down because he's a Spider-Man. Do you get that? During the fight, Vermin escapes, Peter looks away and looks back, and then Kraven's gone too, and Peter's like, oh, come on. Peter realizes that these animal villains can't just be a coincidence, especially when a guy named Kraven the Hunter comes up out of nowhere. Somebody has to be behind this for whatever reason.
Where do all these guys come from?
After making this connection, he starts investigating, and he goes to the one person he knows who might have the answer. Aaron Davis walks to his car at night. The single lamp that lit the empty street is smashed, leaving Davis in darkness. His hand is webbed to a car, and a dark figure stands behind him. Spider-Man interrogates Davis. He's scary, he's mean, he's effective. He's grown a lot in the last 4 years since they've spoke. Davis doesn't know much, Peter never expected that he would, but there's been this guy going around, taking desperate people off the street, offering them a lot of cash, and the next day they come out as some crazy supervillain, either with a robot suit or genetically modified or some other crazy shit. And it's been hurting a lot of innocent people. During this sequence is when we're introduced to a character that I am dying to have in these movies. Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat. Black Cat is another great character that is long overdue to be in a movie. She was almost in Spider-Man 2 and she made it into the game, and she was barely in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that doesn't really count. I really like the Felicia Hardy character because she's this really interesting impact on Peter's life. Not necessarily being a bad influence, but pushing him in ways that are different from other romantic interests. Being that she first met Peter as Spider-Man and that's what she knows him as. And I think it'd be really cool to see that relationship explored throughout the college trilogy. As for casting, I've seen a lot of names get thrown around, but I was thinking Alexa Demie would be a really interesting Black Cat. She plays Maddie in Euphoria, a show that is very good but also traumatized me a lot, so I don't know if I can responsibly recommend it to my audience. And she does a good job of balancing the kind of snarkier, mean energy, but is also given moments of empathy and emotion that work really well. So we established that Black Cat is a recurring cat burglar, but she's only been stealing from like big corporations. And lately she's been trying to investigate the same string of villains that Peter has. This is kind of a departure from the comics, but it can help us to understand Felicia a little bit more and also give us some moments alone with her as she does her own stuff for her own story. Felicia wants Peter to work together with her to figure out what's going on. We can see that the two of them have some good chemistry together. Felicia is pretty flirty with Peter, but not so much that it comes across as gross, like tastefully flirty, you know? But Peter, being the angsty little asshole that he is right now, refuses and he decides to do things on his own. He did get one piece of information from her though. The man that's been going around and taking people off the street, his name is Miles Warren, a scientist working at Roxxon Labs. It doesn't have to be Roxxon, there's like a million evil corporations in Spider-Man media. Just like throw a dart at a board and pick one. Peter's not sure why Warren is doing this or how high it ends up going, but he's determined to put a stop to it before anyone else gets taken advantage of. Throughout the second act, we keep cutting back to Kraven. After his fight with Spider-Man, he's completely embarrassed and ashamed. His wife Alexandra tries to console him, but even she doesn't agree with her husband's ideals about hunting human beings. He starts to train even harder, studying whatever footage and reports of Spider-Man that he can find so he can prove himself as the best fighter in the world. He starts to push his wife away to the point where she stands in front of him, suitcase in hand, and forces him to make a choice. She knows he's a good man, but this obsession is eating away at him and turning him into a monster. But Kraven doesn't listen, and Alexandra leaves him to fight his battle on his own. That's when Kraven is approached by Miles Warren. Warren tells Kraven that his employer is the same one that sent him the anonymous note. Warren offers to help Kraven with his little spider problem by giving Kraven powers he could only dream of. With his help, Kraven can be the ultimate hunter. So Peter goes to investigate one of Warren's labs. He sneaks in through the ceiling and starts to go through all the different projects, animal experimentation, weapons manufacturing, all the same stuff that's been going out to people on the street. As he's searching, he finds a small metal container. Peter opens the case and we see a small piece of black goop that was being contained. Before Peter can really react, Black Cat drops in behind him, also investigating Warren's lab. As Peter turns to look at Felicia, the goo quickly comes alive and jumps out of the case onto the floor before attaching itself to the bottom of Peter's shoe. Not noticing that it escaped, Peter closes the case and begrudgingly agrees to work with Cat to figure out who's funding the lab. They start going through the lab's records and files, and Felicia starts to talk to Peter. And here we can learn a little bit more of her backstory. When she was younger, her dad went to jail, and ever since she's been on her own, stealing to survive. We also established that she was one of the first people that Warren did experiments on, giving Felicia her own powers, and she wants to stop it so nobody else ends up like her. Before they're able to get the information that they need, an alarm goes off and they're forced to escape from some guards together. Maybe here we can get like a little action scene showing off how good of a team they make. During this, a piece of Peter's costume is torn off and left behind before they escape and end up on a rooftop outside. Felicia again suggests that they start working together on this, but Peter, still hurting after losing Ned and MJ, tells her he works alone and doesn't need anyone else. Felicia, frustrated with Peter and his stubborn bullshit, just lays into him, calling calling him out for not being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man anymore. Once he started dealing with Avengers and these big threats, it seems like he gave up on the little guy, and she's giving him the chance to make up for that. It gets to the point where she's just like, fuck you man, I'm over this, before leaving Peter on the New York rooftop alone.
Don't call me. Don't come by my house. We're done.
We cut back to Kraven, at another one of Warren's labs. Warren uses the DNA of every known hunter in the animal kingdom, combined with stolen leaves of the heart-shaped herb from Wakanda to give him his powers. That's a little reference to, imperialism there. It doesn't turn him into a big furry lion man or anything, that'd be weird. Instead, it gives him supernatural strength, speed, senses, everything he needs to be the most dangerous hunter on the planet. I'm giving these characters powers because, like, we established that Peter's, like, really strong in this universe. Warren learns that there's been a break-in at one of the other labs. While there, the guards hand Warren the piece of costume that Spider-Man lost, which Kraven can smell Spider-Man's scent all over. Warren hands Kraven the piece of cloth, and Kraven begins his hunt. After his fight with Cat, Peter shows up to the cemetery. What Felicia said was starting to get to him, and he needed a space where he can think things through. He stands over May and Ben's grave before his spider sense starts going crazy. In the blink of an eye, Peter's hand jolts up to catch something. A large, poison-tipped spear that was heading straight for his head. Kraven the Hunter drops down from the trees, and Peter's spider sense won't stop going off. But that's not right. He took down this guy no problem last time. Kraven lunges at Peter with such speed and strength that it completely catches him off guard. I want Kraven to be a total powerhouse, like almost Hulk level of sheer strength. He just beats the absolute living shit out of Peter, flinging him around, slamming him to the ground, just completely destroying him. Peter gets some good hits in, but this amount of power and wit is just something he's not ready for, especially by surprise. Kraven stabs Peter through the leg with his spear. Peter screams in agony as the poison starts to paralyze him. Kraven goes on to say that spiders are renowned hunters, but Peter is nothing more than a man, and Kraven is going to prove that he's the greatest hunter in the world. As Peter's screaming in pain, the only thing he can focus on is May's grave. She's okay. Everything is okay. Kraven notices that Peter's attention is elsewhere, and so he grabs a shovel. As Peter's vision starts to blur, Kraven says that Peter doesn't deserve an honorable burial, but he'll give him one anyway. Peter is screaming at Kraven, his words slurring, begging him not to. Kraven takes the shovel, approaches May's grave, and he begins to dig. Peter gasps for air. He opens his eyes, but he's greeted with nothing but darkness. Unsure how he's still alive, Peter places his hand in front of his face and meets wood. The camera pulls up through 6 feet of dirt and into the rainy night air to reveal a gravestone. May Parker's gravestone. Peter starts to panic before breathing a sigh of relief. She's not here. Kraven must have switched the coffins. He's a monster, but even he has a sense of honor. Peter cries out in agony as he pushes against the wood, but it doesn't budge. The pressure of the earth turning this thin piece of wood into pure concrete. He punches at the wood. He punches again. Anyone else would give up at this point, but there's something else fueling him. Her grave. He defiled her grave. I'm gonna kill him. Peter screams in agony as his fist breaks through the wood of the coffin. Dirt begins to pour over him, suffocating him, and Peter begins to dig, his screams of agony muffled by the dirt in his face. He's exhausted, he's in pain, he's terrified, he's angry, but more importantly, he's Spider-Man. Out of breath and furious, Peter looks down at his hands, at this new suit, and he feels the power rush through him. He starts to piece things together. The lab, the container, this thing must be some nanotech and it healed him from the poison. But he doesn't have time to think about it right now. Because now, he's on the hunt. Oh, that was a lot. That was a lot emotionally. I apologize for that. The last movies were like silly little Disney Channel rom-coms, and this is like, oh, I'm gonna bury you in your mom's grave. This is fucked up. This is a little much. We cut to Kraven, who after defeating Spider-Man, goes to find his lost wife. He catches her in an airport before she gets on a flight back to Africa, and he tries to reconnect with her. He tells her he did it. He finally beat the spider, and Alexandra is disgusted with him. Hunting human beings, experimenting on himself, burying a man in his mother's grave. Alexandra is horrified at what Sergei has become. Before they came here, he was a good, kind man. He cared for animals, valued life, but now this city, this mission, has turned him from that good man into a monster. Kraven tries to talk to Alexandra to assure her that he's finished, that it's done, but she wants nothing to do with him. And without another word, she leaves him. Kraven, heartbroken, looks to a nearby newspaper stand, where he sees a front page titled, "Vermin, on the Loose." Kraven clutches the newspaper in his hand. His last mistake. His only failure. He knows what he has to do. So, Peter finds Felicia. How does he find Felicia? That's a really good question. I have no idea. But he finds her and he asks for her help. Felicia gives him shit, saying that he thinks he can just show up in some new suit and act like he cares about anybody but himself, and she's not going to fall for that, especially since it's clear that he's only doing this for personal reasons. Peter tells her that she's right about all of that, but if they don't work together, then innocent people are going to get hurt, and he knows he has a responsibility to stop that. Kat agrees to help him, and the two try and figure out Kraven's plan. Peter remembers that Kraven said something about proving he was the best hunter, and he puts together that he has to be going after Vermin. Vermin is probably the biggest victim of Warren's experimentations. A regular guy turned into a monster with no control over his actions, and Kraven wants to kill him for sport. From here, Peter and Felicia try and track down Vermin before Kraven can get to him. They pull up social media feeds, schematics of the city to see where he's been going. Felicia is like the new guy in the chair, except she's a girl and she's standing. It's a complete shift in the dynamic, guys. We're not ready for this. They figure out that Vermin is regularly seen going underground in one area of the city, down into the sewers of Staten Island. They travel through the sewers and they find Vermin just in time to save him from Kraven. And here we get this really cool big action scene that everyone got mad at me for not having in my Amazing Spider-Man 2 rewrite, where the symbiote as well as Kat's help allow Peter to get the upper hand over Kraven. But Peter, fueled by rage and anger, doesn't stop the fight. He continues to punch Kraven while he's down, over and over and over again. Kraven is a bloody mess, egging Peter on, begging him to put him out of his misery and prove that the spider is the superior hunter. Before Peter can land another punch, Felicia grabs his arm and stops him. The fight is over. It's done. Peter falls to his knees, out of breath, and starts to calm down. No Way Home did something that I fucking loved. It put Peter through so much emotionally that it pushed him to his breaking point, nearly killing Green Goblin. It showed that this version of Peter has genuine anger issues and rage inside of him, and that has the potential to go somewhere dangerous. You could say that the decision with the grave is a bit too far, and I admit it probably is. I don't expect them to actually do that, but it's a quick and simple way to get the audience on the side of Peter and absolutely hate Kraven. And so that way we're with him in this moment and we understand why he's doing this. The same way that I want these movies to continue the themes of No Way Home, I want to continue pushing Peter like that until we see what his breaking point is. Last time it was Toby who stopped Peter from killing someone. This time it was Felicia, but what would happen if nobody was there to stop him? We cut to the inside of someone's private office, a massive window overlooking the entirety of New York. Shell companies, rent prices, crime waves, everything leads to one person, one kingpin of crime. From the darkness of the ceiling, Spider-Man appears. Peter says to this mysterious man, "You know, your buddy Warren wasn't so talkative with the cops. Good thing I have a way with words, Mr. Lincoln." L. Thompson Lincoln turns to face Spider-Man and laughs before pouring a glass of whiskey. "Please, Spider-Man, you're here on business. You can call me Tombstone." I want Tombstone to be one of the overarching villains of the trilogy. He's been playing the long haul, working from the shadows, pulling the strings, using Spider-Man to make the city his. Whenever there's a superhero fight, property values go down, so he's been creating all these villains so that he can buy out all this land for cheap and charge crazy high rent prices. He didn't want Kraven to actually kill Spider-Man, he just wanted Peter distracted long enough for the check to get cashed. As for the casting, I would say Marvin Jones III. He's an albino actor just like Tombstone is, and he voiced the character in Spider-Verse, so just pull Zoe Kravitz and bring it back. He was also Tobias Whale in Black Lightning, and he was pretty good in that, so just give him a big Marvel role, why not? Peter tries to surprise Tombstone by punching him, but it's like punching a brick wall. Even with a symbiote, it doesn't faze Lincoln. Tombstone responds by smacking Peter to the ground like it's nothing and standing on his chest. Tombstone goes on to threaten Peter. Ever since Fisk went under the radar, he took over his whole operation, and he's not going to let some punk kid take it away from him. Spider-Man can fight his villains, stop some muggings, help old ladies cross the street, but at the end of the day, this is his city, and he'll do whatever he has to keep it. And on the subject of names, Tombstone says as he releases Peter, "He may not have any records, but everyone has a birth certificate if you look hard enough. Mr. Parker." Peter is silent. Without another word, he leaps out of the window and swings away. We then cut to Felicia's apartment as Peter lands on her balcony. The two of them look at each other in silence. Sure, they work together to stop Kraven, but what's next? Is Felicia gonna go back to stealing diamonds and Peter sulking in his room, the two of them destined to work alone? What a lot of people may not know is that during that initial run of Spider-Man comics, co-creators Stan Lee and Steve Ditko weren't working together the whole time. It definitely started that way, with Stan plotting the books and writing dialogue, and Steve doing the art, and the two of them created the most important and special Spider-Man stories ever told. But over time, Steve decided he preferred working alone. So the two of them started to grow apart and work together less and less until eventually they stopped communicating altogether. And it was this era of Spider-Man comics where Peter started to regress as a character and be selfish. Stan eventually came back to work with artist John Romita Sr. and deliver even more incredible and classic tales, but by then his relationship with Ditko had been completely ruined. Now, I am not trying to disrespect the legacy of this run or of these legendary creators, but the story of these incredible people drifting apart entirely for the detriment of their most impactful character is kind of heartbreaking. It was their collaboration that made Spider-Man special, that gave him his heart. The two of them, together. Peter takes off his mask. Hi, my name's Peter Parker. Black Cat smiles. Felicia Hardy. Before Peter can say another word, Felicia grabs him and kisses him. The music builds, and we cut to Spider-Man and Black Cat leaping and swinging across rooftops, the two of them in perfect harmony as Peter finally remembers what it's like to not be alone, soaring through the night sky together. Oh wait, fuck, I forgot the credit scene, because you know it's not a real movie unless there's a credit scene, ha ha ha! Alright, so earlier in the movie, Rand Robertson invited Peter to his New Year's party. Peter initially said no, but we see that he's changed his mind and is there with all of his classmates, finally getting to know them. He even brought Felicia with him and everything. He's wearing the t-shirt from his old high school, and Flash is all like, I don't remember you at all, but you know, he doesn't really think much of it. Then there's a knock on the door, and Rand asks Peter to go get it. Peter gets up and makes his way to the front door and opens it. And it's Ned Leeds! Surprise! He's the Hobgoblin now. He comes in throwing a bunch of pumpkin bobs, everybody's dying, and he's going, ah! And he's like, I'm the CEO of sex, remember my name. I think I woke my parents up with that joke. Peter opens the front door, and he sees her. Her hair is dyed, she's dressing differently, but still, it's her. MJ Watson. MJ looks at Peter, down at his shirt, and then over at Felicia, and laughs. Woo! Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. Peter looks at MJ, and then over at Felicia, and then back at MJ. Oh, fuck. So you've no doubt noticed that I've been pulling pretty consistently from one of two sources when it comes to this video. Obviously, Kraven's Last Hunt, and then the other being the Spectacular Spider-Man. And I'm doing that for a couple reasons. The first being, I'm not that smart, and I figured if I reference things from a show that people like, I can trick you all into thinking that the video's good. But the second being that that version of Spider-Man is my Spider-Man, and is what made me fall in love with his character in the first place. I grew up with the old comics and the Raimi movies, and I loved them as a kid, but there came a time when I sort of outgrew those stories for a while, and I kind of assumed I was into the character solely because I was young and it was popular. And then, back in like middle school, I managed to catch some reruns of Spectacular, and I remember specifically it was the Lizard episode that made me fully connect with what the character was and represented. The way that the show pulled from all corners of Spider-Man media to make a true, definitive Spider-Man for the modern era, something that can be loved both by kids and adults alike, really spoke to me, and something just clicked. And so now, No Way Home is out in the world, finally free from hype and expectations and leaks, and it delivered something that truly captures what I love about the character. All the stakes, the consequences, the personal drama, and especially with the way this movie left off, there's more potential than ever to have people fall in love with Spidey all over again. So, of course, if I was writing these next movies, I would want to pull from my favorite version of the character. It's only natural. But if that doesn't happen, and they decide to pull from some other source material that I'm not as connected with, that won't be the end of the world. So as long as they can keep this direction that they've set up and continue these stories of consequences, pain, and personal loss, and a hero that keeps getting back up to do what's right regardless of how much the world knocks him back down, I'll be perfectly satisfied. And millions of people can watch these movies about this fantastic, fantastic character, and we can all say, holy shit, I love Spider-Man. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. I am working on a part 2 and a part 3 for this hypothetical college trilogy, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Special thanks to Spider-Storm, Alto the Sting, Cassidy Bond, Christian Umhofer, Connor Langiel, Iron Ninja, Jonah, Corey's Not Fresh, Lime Spice XL, Quick Raz, Ryder Harrison, Sprifty, The Artsy Fartsy Guy, Tyler Goodrich, Yobi Perkins, Zero to Hero 148, and ZZ Tosi for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. This has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Remember that crypto is a stupid scam that's destroying the environment. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.